Welcome to the Alaska Weather Show. I'm meteorologist Peter Chan, coming to you from the National Weather Service on behalf of a unique partnership with Alaska Public Media. It is Saturday, August 20th, 2022. And if you'd like additional information on top of what I provide in this broadcast, you can go to weather.gov. That is the National Weather Service's online presence. It'll bring you to a map of the continental U.S. with Alaska and Hawaii to the lower left. And by pointing and clicking on this map, it is interactive and allows you to gather forecast, watch, warning, advisory information for anywhere in the country. A good way to check up on family and friends. This Saturday afternoon, there is a severe thunderstorm watch in effect for central Illinois, and then much of the southwest from areas of Texas across New Mexico and Arizona are under flood watches due to monsoonal thunderstorm rains that could lead to some flooding or flash flooding. And then areas of the Sacramento Valley have some excessive heat advisories in effect, where temperatures there in the 90s to around 100 degrees. Well, we continue to have a wind advisory in effect this Saturday evening through early Sunday morning for the east central Alaska range up around Donnelly Dome and Black Rapids. South winds could gust as high as 50 miles an hour. Flood advisories continue for areas of the western Kenai, especially along the Kenai River and around Valdez, north central Gulf, due to some heavy rainfall we've seen here over the past week. There is that potential for some minor flooding, especially of low-lying areas and poor drainage areas in these locations, given the rain. This will continue through Sunday. Minor G1 to G2 class geomagnetic storm is possible for tonight into the day on Sunday. So visible aurora may be possible across areas of Alaska that have clear skies. I'll highlight that in a moment. And then continued wet pattern, especially for southern parts of the state along the Gulf. But it is looking like we see a little warmer temperatures here, especially across the interior at the end of this month into the beginning of September. There are those advisories. Wind advisory, east central Alaska range for southerly gap winds gusting as high as 40 to 50 miles an hour. And then the two flood advisories, one for around the Valdez area and the other western Kenai, especially along the Kenai River, where the river there is approaching minor flood stage, so be careful there, especially any type of fishing, rafting, as water levels are high and swift. A quick check of some of the FAA webcams. Dead horse, overcast skies, got low overcast temperature of 37, rather cool, but on the west side of the state, Kotzebue is enjoying mostly clear skies, 55, a chance of seeing perhaps the northern lights there tonight with the clearer skies, as well as across portions of the Seward Peninsula. And then Anchorage, Merrill Field, we finally have a few breaks in the clouds and it's not raining. It's been very wet in Anchorage since the weekend of July 9th, 10th. Since that time, something like 9.5 to nearly 10 inches of rain has fallen. It's been a very wet period for south central Alaska, including the Anchorage Bowl. And then Heidelberg, sunny and warm temperatures this Saturday afternoon in the lower 70s. They'll be even a few degrees warmer come Sunday afternoon, with that warmth holding into early next week. So some very pleasant temperatures, though with the clear skies there could be some patchy fogs and some locally denser fog form later tonight or early on Sunday morning. Quick check of the aurora activity we have on the left side. The planetary K index, which just kind of gives us an idea as to the disturbance effects. And right now we still are not at minor storm level, but that could ramp upward as another coronal mass ejection has arrived, and that could tend to excite there the geomagnetic field. So we'll see if that develops. Right now, at least as of 2 o'clock this afternoon, the aurora oval is situated there over the North Atlantic, southern Greenland, moving into eastern Canada, and that could intensify a bit. So again, areas on the west side of the state around Kotzebue on over toward the north side of the Seward Peninsula, where skies are going to be clear, have the best chance of seeing the northern lights if they do become more active. And then in the south, skies will also be clear there, especially the southern half, inner channels there of the Panhandle, but there could be some areas of fog developing as we get into later tonight and early on Sunday morning. Quick check of fire danger. Still some pockets of high fire danger around the Yukon Flats and middle upper Tanana Valley, but other than that, given the rains, especially south central areas, it's just been really washed out there. Fire threat down near zero, at least due to anything being weather related, because we've just been so wet. Satellite imagery shows another push of moisture and cloud cover lifting north across the northwestern Gulf, Prince William Sound this afternoon, and we continue to see a lot of cloud cover across much of the state. There is a curl in the clouds that kind of extends near and south of Sand Point. That's a reflection of the mid and upper level low pressure system that's really not going to go anywhere. It's going to be sitting down that way south of the Alaska Peninsula in the North Pacific through Sunday, and ahead of it we expect this wrapped up system, because we have a occluded low, occluded front that's wrapped around the low, and that feature is just going to allow ahead of it southeast south low level flow to just pump moisture in areas of the Kenai, especially around Cook Inlet, Kodiak Island, at least the upper half there of the Alaska Peninsula. And notice even Sunday afternoon, the low is still sitting there well south of the Alaska Peninsula. We do have a ridge of high pressure helping bring those clear skies and warmer temperatures. That's a part of that heat wave that goes down into the Pacific Northwest, responsible for those excessive warmth they're experiencing down in the Sacramento Valley there in central California. And by Monday afternoon, the low may not be quite as strong south of the Alaska Peninsula in the North Pacific, but it nevertheless is going to continue to pull moisture northward. Now, we have a data issue out of the Anchorage office, so we don't have any temperature forecast information there coming up, but I'll try best to give you a little idea. 50s for lows, Panhandle, 40s to lower 50s across much of the south, and then in the north, coldest temperatures along the Brooks Range, north slope into the Arctic coast. Temperatures will generally be above freezing, mid-30s. And then Sunday afternoon, warmest readings are going to be areas of east central from Fairbanks to along the Alcan border, from Eagle down toward Northway, lower 70s. Also some lower, even mid-70s showing up there in the southern Panhandle around Ketchikan, Metlakatla, and Craig, as well as Hyder and Heidelberg. Back further west, cloud cover, occasional light showers will keep temperatures cooler across south central Alaska, including Anchorage down through Kodiak Island and the Kenai. Monday morning lows, generally 50s, the Panhandle, upper 40s to lower mid-50s, southern areas and the Alaska Peninsula. Falling off into the 40s north of the Yukon River, and then finally 30s there across the North Slope and Arctic coast. And once again, we could see some lower 70s, Fairbanks to along the Alcan border, as well as in southern parts of the Panhandle Monday afternoon. And let's look at the Climate Prediction Center 6 to 10 day temperature outlook, August 26th through the 30th here as we get up through the end of August. We're anticipating best chance of above normal temperatures will be centered on the western part of the state, middle Yukon Valley, westward to just entering there the Seward Peninsula. And then as we go into the very end of August and early September, it spreads a little eastward, so the interior along and north of the Alaska Range stands a pretty good chance of seeing above normal temperatures, at least not as cool as it has been here since the latter half of July and much of August. And then precipitation is expected to average a bit above normal across much of the mainland, southern two-thirds into southern half of the Panhandle, and then into the end of August, first few days of September, a bit above normal south central areas, especially along the Gulf Coast. So overall, though, it is looking like at least temperatures might moderate a bit here as we head toward the end of the month.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Well, let's check out your aviation weather if you have a flight planned Sunday or into Monday. The main weather feature will be an area of low pressure, not just at the surface, but also in the mid-upper levels of the atmosphere that will be sitting just south of the Alaska Peninsula across the North Pacific. And out ahead of it, southerly flow at lower mid-levels is just going to continue to pump moisture on up in through Cook Inlet, especially the western central portions of the Alaska Range. So as a result, we'll continue to see showers, areas of lower cloud, lower ceilings, where IFR conditions will be prevalent, especially from around Windy Pass, southward through Cook Inlet to Kodiak Island, along the Kenai, as well as back through the southwest, including the lower Yukon Valley. And for Sunday afternoon, IFR conditions continue along and south of the Alaska Range into areas of Cook Inlet, out over the central Gulf, and then back through the lower half of the Alaska Peninsula and extending up through Norton Sound and even up into the central south side of the Brooks Range. Monday morning, rather widespread IFR conditions are expected along the Brooks Range and through the middle Yukon Valley, southward through the western half of the Alaska Range, including Cook Inlet, much of the northern half there of the Alaska Peninsula, Kenai Peninsula, as well as Kodiak Island. And for Monday afternoon, those areas continue along and south of the Brooks Range through the central Yukon Valley, western portion of the Alaska Range, western Gulf, including Cook Inlet down through Kodiak Island and the Alaska Peninsula. And then also we see some areas of IFR that creep up there in through especially the inner channels there of the central panhandle up through the intercoastal mountains. Anatuvik Pass should see MVFR conditions become IFR on Sunday, and that will also be the case for Adigan Pass. Lake Clark and Merrill will hold on to IFR conditions, especially the east entrances, where we have that stream of moisture bumping up there against the Alaska Range, keeping the threat of rain and lower cloud cover and ceilings. Rainy Pass will see IFR conditions on Sunday, as will Windy Pass, again, especially from Windy Pass southward, flying south to the south entrance down through Talkeetna and all the way across there through out Cook Inlet. Isabel Pass may be able to hold on to VFR conditions, especially from there eastward. However, just west of Isabel Pass, there will be IFR conditions holding, and Mentasta Pass should be able to see VFR conditions prevail on Sunday. Further south and west, Tanita Pass will be in deeper moisture and IFR conditions, as will Portage Pass be socked in with IFR conditions all day on Sunday. And then Chilkoot and White should manage to hold on to VFR conditions during the day on Sunday. Freezing levels, they are highest out over the Panhandle in excess of 12,000 feet, as well as the far western Aleutians. We see some freezing levels above 12,000 feet. Lowest freezing levels are along the Arctic coast, especially there from around Wainwright eastward toward Katovik, where the freezing level aloft is down to 2,000 feet. And then generally the western, we do see on the west side of the state freezing levels slip a bit below 7 to below 8,000 feet. Greatest threat for some moderate icing will be areas west side of Cook Inlet, Kamishak Bay, Mount Douglas, east side of Kodiak Island, especially 10,000 feet to a flight level of 18,000 feet. And then up along the Arctic coast, we could see some isolated moderate icing between 3,000 and 12,000 feet. At 30,000 feet, the jet stream level, we find an upper level low circulation there just south of the tip of the Alaska Peninsula. Ahead of it, southerly flow aloft, 65, 70 knots. On the backside, a wind max out of the north cutting across the central Aleutians as high as 115 knots. As we come down to 9,000 feet, roughly 700 millibars, we see some stronger winds, south-southeast winds cutting across Kodiak Island on up into at least the beginning there of the Alaska Peninsula, 40 to 50 knots. On the backside, northeast to north winds, 35 to 40 knots across the eastern into the central Aleutians. And bringing it down to 3,000 feet, low pressure circulation remains there just south of the Alaska Peninsula over the North Pacific, with southeasterly winds entrance of Cook Inlet in through Kamishak Bay and across the southern tip there of the Alaska Range, upwards of 40 to 55 knots. On the backside, winds are out of the northeast to north up to 40 knots, especially from around St. George and St. Paul south across the central and eastern Aleutians. And that translates to the threat of turbulence, surface to 3,000 feet across the central and eastern Aleutians, surface to 5,000 foot turbulence, Kodiak Island, Lake Iliamna, lower Cook Inlet, and then a small pocket there in the far northwest, surface to be to 3,000 feet.
Leatherbacks are the largest turtles on Earth, growing up to 7 feet long and weighing more than 2,000 pounds. These sea turtles are among the most highly migratory animals on Earth, some traveling up to 10,000 miles a year between their nesting and feeding grounds. Prevalent in every ocean except the Arctic and Antarctic, the species overall is declining, more so in the Pacific. In the eastern Pacific, the Mexican population was once thought to be the largest in the world and has experienced an alarming decline.
This trajectory of decline that we've seen, and actually collapse. We're talking about only 20 or 30 turtles nesting every year, where thousands used to just 40 years ago. That's the kind of dramatic decline.
The Western Pacific population has been declining steadily, and it's particularly critical to act now before it collapses, while there are enough turtles and nests to respond to conservation measures. But threats to all leatherbacks in the Pacific need to be addressed.
The top threats to populations are uncontrolled coastal development, all the bad stuff on the nesting beaches, egg harvest, poaching of the females, predation on the eggs by dogs and pigs. Deforestation makes the sand too warm and dry and the eggs don't hatch. Another one is incidental capture in fishing gear. During their vast migrations, they get caught in fishing gear throughout the Pacific. And finally, marine debris, which the leatherbacks mistake for their favorite food, jellyfish, and they choke on those.
Protecting leatherbacks in U.S. waters alone is not enough to ensure the continued existence of the species. The highly migratory nature of Pacific leatherbacks requires cooperation and international collaboration. NOAA is focusing on partnerships with Mexico, Central America, Indonesia, Papua New Guinea, and the Solomon Islands in the Pacific.
Our action plan promotes a holistic recovery strategy that addresses all the sources of mortality. So that's basically ensuring that the remaining nesting sites are protected. And the nests produce as many hatchlings as possible. And then secondly, in tandem with that, is reducing the fisheries-related mortalities. We're working with international partners to incentivize community participation on the nesting beach conservation and developing alternative livelihood programs that wean communities off leatherback resources and introduce alternative methods for food and income. Recovery is going to take a long time, on the order of 20 to 30 years at least, before we see some of these actions bear fruit. But here in the US, we can all help leatherbacks by making seafood choices, for instance, that support sustainable fishing practices. And beachgoers can certainly do their part by keeping our oceans clean of plastic debris, picking up marine litter, particularly plastic bags.
Together with our partners, we are strengthening protection and conservation efforts to ensure a future for leatherbacks, helping them to survive and once again thrive in the waters of the Pacific Ocean.
For over 40 years, NOAA scientists have been collecting data and piecing together the story of the gray whale. Each year, new discoveries are made, revealing the secrets of this ancient traveler. With the northeastern Pacific population recovered, leading scientists from the NOAA Southwest Fisheries Science Center continue their research efforts to help save the western population from extinction. The most effective way to identify individuals and count the population is to photograph them from the surface. Using the gray whale's distinctive markings and gray spots caused by parasites on their skin, scientists document these characteristics to identify individuals.
So we're able to track migratory pathways and corridors by the simple use of photo identification. There are other ways to do that as well, biopsy sampling and genetics.
And from the air.
Aerial photography is one way you can study animals based on their size and shape. So you can learn a lot about nutritive and reproductive condition of whales just by measuring their size and shape from vertical aerial photographs.
You can also put satellite transmitters on them and track them remotely. You put the transmitter on and let them go, and you watch them move across the Pacific or down to China or wherever it might be.
To further learn and discover where these great sojourners swim, the team of researchers traveled to Russia and set up camp on Sakhalin Island.
The main focus of our research while we were on Sakhalin was to collect photo identification. If it was a whale that we had not collected a genetic sample from previously, we would also attempt to collect a sample from the whales.
Whereas whales are endowed with natural insulation, their human observers must gear up to brave the cold in order to study these marine giants up close.
We're typically only able to work about 1/3 of the time that we're there, and that's mostly due to this fog that just invades the area and sits sometimes for weeks on end. So it can be very challenging to try and do field work in this site.
Recently, 2 whales from the western population surprised scientists by migrating across the Pacific to the waters of California and Mexico.
It's a really fun finding. It's added another piece to the puzzle that we didn't previously know about. And I would have to say that it's opened up more questions than we had before.
Research scientists from Japan, Russia, and the United States share images of animals they've spotted.
We take a photograph of an individual off of Sakhalin Island, and we get a phone call from Japanese scientists, and they say, hey, guess what? We've got a picture of a gray whale in Japan. We say, can you send it to us? We'd love to try and match it. They'll send us the picture, we'll compare it to our catalog, and we'll say, hey, we've got a match from Sakhalin to Japan.
Unlike many species of whales that still remain on the endangered species list, the eastern Pacific gray whale, once on the brink of extinction, now numbers about 20,000 individuals. Recovery efforts that started 40 years ago and the ongoing research and monitoring by NOAA scientists have contributed to the conservation of the gray whales. Together, with legal protection and public education, scientists are playing their part to ensure the survival of this magnificent migratory animal.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back to the final segment of our show. Before we get into the marine forecast, let's look at the sea ice edge. And the ice continues to slowly melt off along the Arctic coast, though some of the larger pack ice has certainly retreated further north, and areas along the Russian coast that had seen a bit more in the way of some ice hugging there has finally seen that break up further and melt off. So the melting process will continue to be very slow here through the late summer. For marine weather on Sunday, the inner channels of the Panhandle winds will be northerly 10 knots or so, north-northwesterly with waves running a couple of feet. The outer coastal area there, we're expecting winds to be northwest to northeast, Sitka down through Craig, 10 knots, waves 4 feet, and then turning more east-southeasterly around 10 to 15 knots from Gustavus, Yakutat westward. On Monday, winds will be southeasterly 10 to 15 knots for the inner channels, waves 2 to 3 feet. And then the outer coast, we anticipate winds 15 to 20 knots from the southeast Craig through Sitka, but increasing southeast to easterly to 25 knots north of Sitka through off of Gustavus and Yakutat, with waves running 6 to 7 feet. The northwestern Gulf, strongest winds will be there, the area around the entrance of Cook Inlet to Kamishak Bay, easterly 30-knot winds, waves 8 to 9 feet. Otherwise, northeast winds 10 knots, Prince William Sound, waves 2 feet, and middle northern Cook Inlet, northeasterly winds 15 to 20 knots with waves of 4 to 6 feet. On Monday, winds will be northeasterly across Prince William Sound with waves of 3 feet. Generally northeasterly winds 20 to 25 knots, mid and upper Cook Inlet with waves of 5 to 7 feet. With easterly winds continuing to 30 knots and waves 9 to 10 feet there at the entrance of Cook Inlet and off the Kenai. For Kodiak Island, winds will be southeast to east on Sunday at 25 knots, waves 7 to 8 feet. Look for easterly winds, Bristol Bay, 20 knots, waves 3 feet, turning northeasterly 20 knots with waves 5-6 feet there north of Cold Bay. More variable winds up to 15 knots south of Sand Point. For Monday, winds will be generally out of the northeast through Shelikof Strait at 30 knots, waves 10-11 feet. Look for southeast winds off of Kodiak Island and east of Chiknik there with waves of 7 to 9 feet. Winds will turn northeast to north 20 to 25 knots on the Bering side with waves 4 or 5 feet Bristol Bay upwards to 6 feet north of Cold Bay. The eastern Aleutians on Sunday will see northwesterly winds to 30 knots with waves 8 to 11 feet, falling off to 25 knots middle Aleutians, and then variable west of Adak around 15 knots with waves of 5 feet. On Monday, winds will generally be out of the northwest across the central and eastern Aleutians at 20 to 25 knots, waves 6 to 8 feet on the North Pacific side and 7 to 8 feet on the Bering side, before turning south-southwest at 15 knots west of Adak through Kiska with waves of 4 feet. Across the southwest coast, eastern Bering, open waters of the Bering, northerly winds 25 knots, picking up to 30 knots down towards St. Paul and St. George with waves 6 to 9 feet. North winds 20 knots there in Norton Sound with waves of 4 feet. And then for Monday, winds will be northeasterly out of Norton Sound at 15 knots with waves of about 3 feet. And look for generally northerly 20-knot winds south of St. Lawrence Island, pushing down through the area of St. Matthew into St. Paul and St. George with waves 4 to as high as 7 feet, especially just east of St. Paul and St. George. Along the Arctic coast, winds will be out of the northeast to east, 15 to 20 knots, waves 3 to 4 feet. Winds will pick up east to northeast before turning northerly down through the Bering Strait to 25 knots, waves 6 to 7 feet lower Chukchi Sea, and 6 to 7 feet through the Bering Strait north side of St. Lawrence Island. Monday's winds do pick up 35-knot easterly gales vicinity of Kaktovik, and they fall off to 25 knots as you get further west to Utqiagvik. Waves 6 to 8 feet there along the Arctic coast, and expect easterly winds to 15 to 25 knots off of Point Lay, Cape Lisburn, Kivalina, with waves of 7 to 8 feet, middle Chukchi Sea, and running around 4 feet before turning northerly there on the north side of St. Lawrence Island with waves there of 4 feet. Quick check, low pressure will be situated south of the Alaska Peninsula and the North Pacific Sunday afternoon. It'll continue to pump moisture into western areas of the Gulf, west side of the Alaska Range and the Alaska Peninsula. And Monday afternoon, the low doesn't move much. It continues to sit there along the North Pacific with additional moisture being pulled in, especially along the western portion of the Gulf. So that wraps up our show for this Saturday evening. I always appreciate you joining me when I have a chance to host things, and be sure to come back tomorrow night. I'll be here again. Thank you for watching.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.